He was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, on the 10th of September, 1934, to a school teacher and a social worker, and had a radio show of his own before he was old enough legally to operate a car. His mother would drive him to the station. He had evidently already settled the matter of what kind of life he wanted. You can see it in his eyes, even as a boy, and then as a young man in jacket and tie. He knew what he was meant to be, and knew too, I think, that it wouldn't take him very long. It didn't take him very long. Barely out of college in North Carolina, Charles Kuralt went to work for CBS News.
What they're practicing for is not just a game. The World Series is an event in search of a hero.
Which was where he stayed for 37 years.
It was just about here that Jacques Cartier stopped in 1534, unable to maneuver his boat past the rapids of the St. Lawrence River. Where he stopped, other men are beginning on this April afternoon in 1959. This is where the St. Lawrence Seaway begins.
In a moment, an eyewitness report on Cuba today by correspondent Charles Kuralt.
He stayed at CBS News, yes, but he did not stay put. From the very first, Charles Kuralt was a traveling man.
The Bossa Nova's been hanging around in this alley in Copacabana for a long time, a new cult waiting for some members. The tourists all walked right by on their way to the big nightclubs, where the samba reminded them that they were in Brazil, and where the twist reminded them that by jet they're only 9.5 hours from the Peppermint Lounge.
Dismissed by his employer, deserted by his union, unneeded by his community, ignored by his country, except for $56 a month in food stamps, I.B. Johnson mines only enough coal now to keep his own family warm. And nobody pays him for that.
He liked to say that he never was a real reporter. That wasn't true. He was.
Everything you're about to see took place in Vietnam on Christmas and on the days just preceding Christmas. We thought you might be interested to know what it was like.
He went to all the dangerous places reporters are supposed to go.
That morphine will take hold in about 15 minutes.
Alpha Oscar, this is Alpha November, over.
If you're the kind who prays, you might pray that these other brave men, the 3rd Platoon of A Company, all leave this terrible place safely and come home to you next Christmas. The temperature is only about 10.
And he went to some places no one is supposed to go.
The thing about the Arctic in the spring is that you go along with beautiful weather, the sun shining down, blue sky overhead, a gentle breeze, and then a blow like this comes along to remind you where you are.
And in all those places, he did brilliant, memorable work.
People who come from towns where the streets are named Oak or Maple or Maine are always disturbed by the cold, anonymous sound of New York street names. It's true that 117th isn't exactly the most romantic or imaginative name for a street, but you shouldn't conclude from that 117th Street is just a line on the crosstown grid of Manhattan. This block between Lenox and 7th is as interesting and varied as your block.
If you begin to get a little tall, I ought to pack up my things and haul.
He always got the facts, of course.
117th Street still exerts its pull on people. They call themselves 17th Streeters, and even those who grew up here and moved away often come back.
But he got something else, too. Something that other reporters tend to miss. He got the meaning of the story. And he put the meaning in such a way that we came to think we had known it all along. Only we hadn't.
As high as you can go on 117th Street is to the 5th floor rooftops. Up there you can keep pigeons, or read a book, or make love, or occasionally be alone if that's what you want, but you cannot go higher.
He made it sound like folk wisdom, burnished over time. But it was his wisdom, burnished by his writing and his skill.
A country of 14 million people, a sovereign nation among the nations of the world, in which there is not one doctor, not one lawyer, no courts and no judges, and in which the only law is the rule of violence. This is the Congo.
As it turned out, however, danger was not what interested him.
I have miles and miles ahead of me.
Decency was what interested him. And so, in 1967, in his own country, in a bus, he set out in search of that.
Oh, he said he was the best, and I trusted him.
There you go.
Philosopher Diogenes wandered ancient Greece, lantern in hand, looking, in vain he feared, for even one honest man. Charles Kuralt did better than Diogenes.
This is a song you'll never hear again. The song of the Gandhi dancer.
Oh, lay my ball in the middle of the pack. Ain't gonna lie to the Gandhi bag.
He found honest men, and honest women, too, by the hundreds.
The man moaning in the background is our cameraman. Mr. Bleckman had just been put through a snap roll by a little old lady of 80.
That's good for your veins.
And directed our attention to them for 25 years on the road.
Bill Patch is one of those American tinkerers. By tinkering with valves and pipes and an old tea kettle, he converted his Nash Rambler to corncob power.
Well, if we could just get that right combination there.
Nobody could accuse you of wasting any string lately.
No, not.
He had already been to every state of the Union by the time he did that all over again in a single year for the bicentennial of this country, filing one report from each state every week for 50 weeks for the CBS Evening News.
This is town meeting day.
And he went, or so it began to seem, to every hamlet of every state, too.
He was shot through the heart.
No matter how out of the way his destination may have been, he always brought meaning back with him.
John A. Mathis, June 10th, 1856.
What was it that animated him? I asked him that once, not too long ago. I'm not calling for you to criticize your journalistic colleagues here, but it seems to me admiration is in sort of short supply, generally speaking, in the world of reporting.
Well, it's unsophisticated, isn't it, to admire your subject? You're supposed to investigate your subject and have a healthy skepticism about what he says. I suspended my skepticism a long time ago. It's so much more fun, though unsophisticated, maybe even unprofessional in a journalist. It's so much more fun just to sit there and enjoy the guy and learn a few things. Come meet a school of mermaids, if maids is the right word.
Don't you feel a little old for this?
We go on the theory that growing old is only a bad habit that a busy person has no time to form.
He watched us and learned a few things. We watched him and learned a lot. About mailboxes and clotheslines. About a man who provided bicycles to children who would not have had them otherwise. About a landlocked farmer with a dream of the sea. About some men who made a bridge. And one man who made bricks all his long life. About a scholar in a cabin in the woods. And small towns. About an American born in Russia who went home finally late in his life to bring tears to the eyes of his countrymen. And about another old man of Russia who never did leave, but who waited 50 years for someone to carry his message of gratitude to the American soldiers who saved his life during the Second World War. We learned about steam engines and dominoes and a doctor you could pay with a handshake. We learned about a league of women who banded together once upon a time to feed a multitude, and a road builder working all by himself, and a fisherman, and a jogger of 104.
Humiliated by a 104-year-old man.
It was a non-fiction novel he was writing in installments over the course of a long career, the theme of which was that the heartland of this country extends from coast to coast, from the Black Hills to the Rio Grande, and from Puget Sound to the Florida Keys. We all inhabit the heartland, we learned. And now we all think we knew these people from the first, and these truths. But we didn't, and never would have known them without this Walt Whitman carrying a reporter's pad, who heard America singing, and who went out to collect its songs so we could hear them too.
Good morning. Here begins something new.
He had a regular stand as well for 15 years on this broadcast. Here too, all along, decency was his interest. Before Charles Kuralt and Sunday Morning came along, there was no place on television for this country's great makers of music or of art, or for the great contributors to its spirit. He made a place for them. From the giants of our day to the small stories that turned out not to be small, he preserved for us every reason we have as a country to be hopeful. How much would we have overlooked? How much would we have forgotten? How much would we have failed to understand had we not had the chance to see ourselves through his eyes?